You have
Thank you. Ah, bonjour, bonsoir, et c'est moi. Um, Perhaps some of you remember me. We met for such a brief time, and I am so very happy to be back. For those who are wondering, who is this woman and why is she speaking in this fantastic accent? My name is Marie Catherine Desjumel, Baroness d'Aulnoy. And I am joining you from, well, a bit of a time ago. It's not so many years, 1697 France. And I'm so curious to know, have any of you ever heard of me? Anyone? Anyone? I see one or two heads nodding. Have you heard of fairy tales? Yes.
sí, sí.
Well, I am the person who coined the term conte de fées, fairy tale. You're welcome. Yes, it was me. And I am not surprised that so many of you do not know who I am. You see, women are often buried in history, or we are not spoken of at all. I am curious, though, how many of you perhaps know the name Charles Perrault or the Grimm brothers? Yes, the Grimm brothers. Those bastards. They stole from everyone. I mean, really. But for me, I would love to share with you just a little bit about who I am, and then if it's okay, to share a story with you that I myself wrote, a fairy tale. So, as I had told you, my name is Marie Catherine Desjumel, and then later I was Baroness. I did not start out Baroness. No, I was born in a somewhat wealthy family, but the family, there were so many arranged marriages. This is something I hear is not so much the case anymore. And I must tell you, thank goodness for this, because I was 15 years old and my father decided it was a very good match. Not because the man was wonderful, no, because of this, the money, And the man, 30 years older than me, what could we really have in common? I mean, come on. But I will say he was a baron, and yes, that opened some doors, and that part was very nice, His parties were fabulous. I cannot complain about that. But we had nothing in common. And the other thing with the baron, he liked to gamble a lot, a lot, a lot, and it was really quite a problem. But you know how sometimes problems can work in your favor just a little bit. Well, it just so happens that in France, well, of course, I invented Conte Fées, a fairy tale. The French also invented something else you may be familiar with, affairs. And, when I was 15 and I married this man so much older, and I did not really appreciate him so very much. But the thing is that, well, I had affairs. And there were two very lovely young men, young, older than me. One was 18 and one was 19. And we had the most marvelous time together. I mean, we would go to these soirees, and there was the drinking and the dancing, and it was really fantastic. And then we were wondering what to do with the Baron, because honestly, that part's not so fantastic. And these young men were also quite clever. And they said to me, Marie Catherine, we have a plan. And so they framed the Baron. And it wasn't so hard to frame a crime on him because the man was a gambler. He had many, many enemies. And so, oh, so désolé, he ended up in French prison. Oh, the poor Baron. But for me, I was very, very free then. And with the young man, we had a fantastic time until sadly they were captured. And it was, you might have heard of the thing called the guillotine. Yes, well, they did not meet such happy ending. No, not everyone has a happily ever after. But for me, I was also arrested, and I'm a very resourceful woman. And so when we were at the police, I noticed that there was a window where the chamber pot was. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, sometimes a door closes and a window opens. Well, I said, por favor, oh, please, please, s'il vous plaît, I need to use the bathroom, oh, please, I need some privacy, oh, please, please. And because I was a woman of certain standing, I went into the room with a chamber pot. And then I climbed out the window and escaped to the church next door. It was wonderful. At church, they cannot come and get you in the church. And then I escaped from the church to Spain. And I traveled Spain for 2 years. I wrote two memoirs. In French, we call them histories. And like, I kind of hear these days you are dealing with history, not, you know, people reinventing and changing. And well, I must say I'm a little bit familiar with that because I wrote my histories the way I experienced it. And apparently, I made some people very upset. They told me I was not telling the truth and I was being very mean to them. And well, my response to that is be nicer, you know, be a better person, and I will not write terrible things about you. So, anyway, I wrote the memoirs and I traveled to Spain. And some say I was a spy. I will leave that for another story for another time because I'd really love to share with you one of my favorites of the stories I've written, and it's called Pretty Goldilocks or Beautiful Goldilocks. And I heard that you have a story about Goldilocks too, but somehow there's these three bears in it. I have no idea where the bears, how they got into the story, because in my stories, there are no bears in the story at all. So, once upon a time, there was a beautiful, beautiful princess named Pretty Goldilocks. And she loved to sit on her veranda, holding her mirror and brushing her very beautiful long hair. And one afternoon, the king from the kingdom next door happened to be riding by in a procession. And he saw Pretty Goldilocks. And in that very moment, he fell in love. I do not know what it is with all of these men falling in love with women. They see them for 30 seconds and all of a sudden think, oh, that's who I want to spend the rest of my life with. But whatever, he fell in love with her. And he was very bold and he asked her to marry him. And what do you imagine she said? She said no. She said, no, I really, really enjoy my sovereignty. Thank you so much, but merci, no. The king was not pleased. He went back to his kingdom and he ended up having a conversation with his favorite courtier, who was named Charming. I'm thinking some of you have heard of Charming as a prince. In my story, he started out as courtier. You know how sometimes men get promoted? Not because they have any talent, but they're very charming. I think that's what happened. Anyway, so he was a courtier and he and the king, they were very, very good friends, very, very close friends with each other. And one day, the charming was speaking about how if he had gone and he had presented about the king to Goldilocks, she would have said yes. Well, somehow this got misinterpreted by the king. And by the way, Charming, he had some friends. If you ask me, they weren't really his friends because these friends went to the king and said, oh, did you hear what Charming said? That if he had gone to Goldilocks, she would have said, oui, and married him. The king was not happy about this at all. And he threw Charming into the dungeon, which is also no picnic, you know? And there's poor Charming, who's done nothing wrong, always tries to do right by the king. And every day he would cry and he would just speak about, King, no, I would never, I adore you, my king, my king. And finally, the king, it's really a miracle, believed Charming and set him free on condition. Charming had said that if he had spoken to Goldilocks, that Goldilocks would have said yes to the king. So this was the task set upon him. And he agreed. Charming, of course, because he loved his king. And the king said, you know, if she says no, it is guillotine for you. Oh, a little bit of pressure, no? So the Charming, he rides on his big noble steed. And as he's riding, you know, it's a journey. Oui. And he passes a river. And as he's passing the river, and he looks down at the ground, he sees a carp, this big fish, and oh, this poor fish, it's out of the water, it's on the river bank. Oh, and Charming feels so badly. And then this crazy thing happens, because it's a fairy tale. The carp speaks. Please, if you help me, I shall return the favor. Well, Charming, he was not only charming, he was very empathetic. And so he reached down and puts the carp back in the water. And the carp picks back up and says, I promise I will help. Just call me. And with that, the carp goes into the water. And Charming gets back on his noble steed and he's riding through a meadow and he looks up in the sky. And there, up in the sky, swirling around, there is a black raven. Caw, caw, and an eagle. And that eagle is chasing the raven around and around. And Charming's thinking to himself, why is it that the bigger beast, the one with more power, is always somehow making trouble for the smaller ones? He did not like this at all. And he's watching them spiral and he cannot take it anymore. So he reaches into his quiver and he pulls out an arrow. He's an expert shot. And he pulls back that bow and fling! He shoots that eagle and it spirals down out of the sky, lands on the ground, and the raven flies down and it lands in a tree. And it calls out to him, caw, caw, call me if you need help. And he understood every word. And then the raven flew off into the sky. Well, Charming gets back on his noble steed. He rides now through the forest. In the fairy tales, it always happens in three, right? So there's going to be a third magic thing that happens. Well, it just so happens there's an owl. There's this poor little owl and it's caught in a net. Charming, he feels so badly for it. And he brings that owl out of the net and the owl looks up at him. Hoo, 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 hoo. You need help. You know who to call. And the owl flies off into the sky. Well, Charming finally makes it to the palace, and there is Goldilocks sitting on the veranda, brushing out her long hair, staring at herself in the mirror. And Charming, he sees what the king means about Goldilocks. Oh, mon Dieu, she is beautiful. And he looks up at her and he says, Goldilocks, I come bearing the news from the king who still wishes to marry you. And my goodness, you are a vision. I can understand why he sees the beauty in you. She says, is it the king from the palace next door? Yes. I only told him no. Oh, oh, Goldilocks, you beautiful, beautiful woman, please, may I extol the virtues of the king. There are so many. He is intelligent and clever and charming and generous and kind and Goldilocks ponders for a moment and says, well, I'm not going to say yes straight out, but if you would go on a quest, I will consider your offer. A quest, of course. Yes, I will go on a quest for you. And she tells him that she has the most favorite ring. Oh, it's désolé, a golden ring, and it is lost. And if you would please go to the river, and if you would find it for me, perhaps I will say yes to marrying the king. He does not need to be asked twice. Charming gets back on the noble steed, rides through the forest, through the meadow, down to the river. And of course, who does he call for? The carp. Carp, carp, I need your help. And the carp swims up. What can I do for you? It's a ring and the princess has lost it. Could you please get it? And just like that, the carp dives into the water and in moments comes back up to the surface and spits the ring out onto the riverbank. And he takes, and of course, Charming takes that ring, puts it into a tiny little pouch, and rides on his noble steed back to Princess Goldilocks.
I talked to you. I said I was going to eat now.
And whoever's mic is on, if you could turn it off. Thank you. So there they are, and she is quite shocked when he pulls out of the pouch her golden ring. Honestly, she did not think he'd be up to the task. And she says, oh, merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup. Okay. Uh, well, charming. I have another quest for you to go on. Because, of course, it's a fairy tale and you know it's gonna happen in three. There's a giant who lives in the kingdom next door, and he is making such a nuisance, and he keeps asking me to marry him, and I don't want to marry him. Please, could you kill him for me and bring back his head? Well, honestly, it was one thing to go and get a ring, but oh, to have to vanquish a giant. And apparently the giant was very big and very mean. But what could Charming do? Because if he goes back to the king without Goldilocks, it's a guillotine. So, yes, I will go and try to vanquish the giant. And so he gets on his noble steed and he rides to the kingdom next door. And there's a giant. He must be 20 feet tall. And he's thinking what to do, what to do. He remembers the raven. And he calls out, caw, caw. He learned to speak raven. You know, he's a very smart man. Caw, caw. And the raven flies down out of the sky. And of course, Charming tells him, please, could you help me to vanquish this giant? Otherwise, I shall be killed, and I don't want to die. And of course, the raven says, away. And the raven flies around the giant's head. And if you don't like gruesome, cover your ears for just a moment. And the raven flies around the giant's head and pokes out both eyes. And that's exactly when Charming uses the moment. He's an expert shot with the bow and arrow, and he shoots many of the bow and arrow until the giant falls down dead. And then, well, she asked for the head, so using the head, she takes the head, oh my goodness, back to Goldilocks and presents it to her. And you think she'd be like a bit mortified, but no, she's like, oh, you did it. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. No more being bothered by the awful giant next door. I have one final quest for you. If you could please go to the lake, and it's a fountain of youth. And please, I just need one tiny vial so I can keep this beautiful complexion so I'm always very lovely. And of course he says, wait. He gets on the noble steed and he rides for a while and he remembers that it's very far away. And if he's going to ride, it's going to take a very long time. And he remembers, the owl. And the owl can fly, could get to this lake so much quicker. So hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo. And the owl flies down out of the sky, lands on the branch. Yes, how can I help? Please, just a tiny vial of water from the fountain of youth. Do you know where it is? Of course. And the owl flies off into the sky and in a quarter of an hour returns with a vial of the water. And Charming takes it back to Goldilocks, who honestly is very, very surprised. And she keeps looking at Charming thinking, my God, he's so handsome. And he's so charming. And he's been willing to go on 3 quests. Charming, what if you and I get married instead? And he's like, oh, no, the king, please, marry the king. And just think, it's okay. You'll be in the same kingdom. And, you know, the French have something called an affair. So it's a win-win situation. So he puts her on the noble steed. They ride back to the palace, and the king is overjoyed, and he wastes no time. He's thinking, I don't want her to change her mind. Maybe she wants her sovereignty again. They have the wedding that very evening, and it is a beautiful affair. It's so lovely. It's so lovely. And then days go by. They're having she's not having a great time, honestly, no. But the king's having a very nice time, you know. And then he looks at Goldilocks and he realizes she's so beautiful and I am older. And I know she has the water from the fountain of youth. I shall put it on my skin and look very lovely for her. What the king does not know is that one of the ladies in waiting has accidentally broken the vial containing the fountain of youth water and has replaced it with a vial that, unbeknownst to her, is poison. And it's the kind of poison that if you pat it on your skin, it kills you dead. Well, the king, he does not know, and he takes the vial and he puts the little drops, pats it on his face, and he drops down dead. And then Goldilocks marries Charming. And how do they live, everyone? Happily ever
Ever after.
And merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and visit you and share my story with you. I hope you recall my name, Marie Catherine Dalnoy, Baroness Dalnoy. Mwah. A pleasure to meet you all. Thank you so much.